Well, I want to talk today about an article that I came across at the popular blog Above the Law. The article here, the title is "The High Cost of Legal Education Saved Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez." Subtitle: Sometimes the best decisions are the ones that don't cost you 3 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's written by someone named Elie Mystal, who's an editor at Above the Law. Here's the article. Here it is. There. And anyway, what sparked this article was that at the Michael Cohen hearings, Ocasio-Cortez had the opportunity to ask questions of Michael Cohen, and a lot of people were looking forward to her line of questioning, because they assumed, I think, that it would be very provocative or she would use it as an opportunity to grandstand. But Ocasio-Cortez ended up asking very lawyerly questions, so to speak. They were very precise and targeted, and she ended up surprising everyone and pleasantly surprised. So anyway, after the hearing, Ocasio-Cortez got a number of comments and praise about her questions. And someone tweeted at her, "I was very impressed with AOC today. She should have been a lawyer." And then Ocasio-Cortez replied, quote, I always entertained law school, but couldn't afford it, so now I'm learning in the job." So this prompted this author here, Elie Mystal, to write about whether or not Ocasio-Cortez made the right decision on whether or not to go to law school. And then he drew some lessons there for other people who are thinking about going to law school. So the argument that Mystal basically makes here is that Ocasio-Cortez made the right decision by not going to law school, and he basically argues, not directly, but he at least sort of makes arguments that are suggestive of the idea that Ocasio-Cortez may not have even become a congresswoman had she gone to law school. And Mystal basically makes three arguments on why he thinks Ocasio-Cortez might not have become a member of Congress had she gone to law school. So what he argues is that she graduated from BU, Boston University, in 2011, and particularly given the realities of the legal market at that time, or around those years when she presumably would have gone to law school, he says that the decision, had she gone to law school, it would have entailed three realities. So number one, he says that she probably would have had to go into debt to go to law school, and the article here speculates that she would have taken on $150,000 of debt. So number two, which is related to her debt burden, Mystal says that she would have been very tempted with the pressure of a loan, that even if she had wanted to do something else, she would have felt pressure to become a lawyer and then get on that track, not only of paying her the debt, but also now getting on another track. And then the third argument he calls the quote time cost factor, where he's basically saying here like the opportunity cost. So Mystal writes, in the 3 years she meaning Ocasio-Cortez would have been in law school, she worked as a bartender and waitress. These positions are not as glamorous as spending 3 years in a law library, but it certainly keeps you grounded in how, quote, regular people are living their lives. So what he's basically saying is, had she been in law school, she would not have been interacting with people, getting the kind of experience that she got from being a bartender, and she might not have been as competitive of a candidate for Congress. Now, I thought this was very interesting, and this actually goes to the heart of the type of question that made me want to become a law school admissions consultant in the first place, because I think that these sorts of counterfactuals and these kinds of decisions, I think the author's quite right here. They're the kind of details that in biographies and profiles that people tend to overlook, but in fact they're very critical points, especially because people are making these decisions in their teenage and 20 years that they can have a great deal of effect down the line. And so there are a number of points here that I think are worth looking at. So the question is, could Ocasio-Cortez, would she have become a member of Congress had she gone to law school? And, I'm sort of agnostic here on the question. I think that's one for historians to think about, biographers to think about. I think a lot of it obviously depends on her particular circumstances. But where I do pretty strongly disagree with the author here is the lessons he draws, not only in looking at Ocasio-Cortez, but also then drawing lessons for other people who are similarly situated. So what Mystal writes here, he says, and I'm quoting now, he says, "What I take from her story is, don't go to law school unless you really want to be a lawyer. Don't go to law school because you're kind of interested in law stuff. Don't go because you can't think of anything better to do. Don't go because, quote, lawyer sounds like a real job, quote, while, quote, community organizer sounds like something you made up to piss off Republicans." So, there are basically two questions here. I mean, one, would Ocasio-Cortez have become a member of Congress had she gone to law school? I think that's a historical matter. As a counterfactual, it's something we can't know. But there's another question here, which is, what should people who are situated similarly to Ocasio-Cortez, what are the lessons that they should draw from the story? And here, I think there are a number of reasons to question what the author is saying, and I want to give a different answer to that question. So, first of all, there are a couple of assumptions here that the author makes. One is about the purpose of going to law school, and the author here says, don't go to law school unless you really want to be a lawyer. Well, the obvious counter argument here is that becoming a lawyer is actually only one path that's available to you by virtue of becoming a lawyer, and there are a lot of benefits of going to law school potentially that have nothing to do with practicing law. I mean, I think that when you're looking at any kind of a prestigious degree, really anywhere from high school to college to some kind of a graduate degree, in many ways the real benefit of it comes from the signaling effect. The signaling meaning, what it tells people about your intellectual fitness, academic fitness, professional character, and so forth. It allows you to develop a network. It trains you in a certain kind of a way. So I don't think that that's necessarily a correct assumption in and of itself. And then the second big assumption that he makes here is the fact that a decision to go to law school, or at least a top law school, entails taking out massive amounts of debt. That's not true, to say the least. And I think that even if you're looking at the narrow question here of whether or not it makes sense to go to law school if your goal is to become a member of Congress, I mean, I think, I don't deny that Ocasio-Cortez developed all kinds of skills from becoming a bartender, but I think it doesn't take a great deal of scrutiny to know that going to law school, and especially a prestigious law school, tends to be a more common filter or feeder to becoming politically powerful than being a bartender or whatever else Ocasio-Cortez had done in the interim. So, I think the author and the piece here is missing a point, and the way that I would think about it is, whether or not it makes sense to, like, let's say you're a college student or a recent graduate of college, and your goal is to become a member of Congress. The question of whether or not it makes sense to go to law school, I think, really depends on, one, your admission strategy. What is it that how are you actually planning during the application process, and then where you go and under what circumstances you go to. So, like, if let's say Ocasio-Cortez or someone like her had come to me during their sometime in college, and they said, okay, my goal is to become a member of Congress from the Bronx, and I want to do this at a relatively young age. I think the first question that one has to think about is what sorts of law schools are even on the table. And here the question is basically one that depends on what is the GPA of the applicant, what are their LSAT scores, what does their overall profile look like, will they get the benefit of affirmative action, do their parents have the ability to donate large amounts of money. I mean, there are any number of these factors, and when you take all of these into account, one of the things that becomes obvious is that going into debt to go to law school is by no means a given. Even the top schools, including Columbia, by the way, offer merit-based scholarships to people regardless of their socioeconomic status. So, you can apply and you get a full ride to go there, and they do that to basically get people, drive them away from their competitors like Stanford or Yale or whatever. Another way, obviously, that you can go to law school debt-free is by spending your time in law school in a certain way. That could be, lining up a job during this period, getting a generous financial aid package, applying for scholarships, getting donors. So this assumption that you have to go to law school and pay the full bill not only is not true, I would argue that it's actually a pretty sloppy way of going to law school. There are any number of ways, even if you're well off and wealthy, that you don't actually have to pay. And then the question here really becomes, if your goal is to become a member of Congress, what are the things that you actually need to be doing? What are the things you need? And the truth is that they actually have nothing to do with being a bartender. One of the things that let's really look at what you have to do. So one is you have to live in your district where you're running. Two, you need to have some kind of a message that can appeal to your constituents. Number three, you have to develop the skill set that comes with being a politician. Number four, you have to be able to raise the money. And number five is then you actually have to be in a position to be able to run a campaign. And I would argue, that not only all of these things you can do during law school. I mean, I think that this point here about the time cost is very much mistaken, because even if you go to law school for 3 years, I mean, you could go to any number of good schools right in the area. You could go to Columbia, Brooklyn Law School, Fordham, NYU. I mean, there's a whole number of things. And then if you have a little bit of money, you can even basically commute from another city. I mean, if you live near an airport or a train station that's a couple hours away, I mean, you could conceivably go to a law school in New Haven. You could go in Boston, and I know this because I did it. I was working and traveling between New Haven and Washington and Rhode Island. I mean, it's not that hard to do, actually. And then you think about all the benefits that potentially come from being in law school. Right, I agree with Kathy here that there is just value in studying and gaining more knowledge. But you can also now develop a whole legal network that can help finance your campaign. It can open up any number of different job opportunities during the summer that might not be available in the absence of a law degree. If the author here is saying that, well, you need to be a bartender in order to interact with your constituents, I think that's total nonsense. I mean, you can interact with your constituents doing any number of things. So the point here is that I think that the author here raises a good question, but I think that this decision of whether or not you're making the right move, going to law school if you want a certain career outcome, I think I'm not sure that there's a right or wrong answer here. I don't think there's a categorical blanket statement that you can make here. I think it really comes down to the individual and their circumstances. And I also think that it really depends in many ways, not so much on the decision of whether or not to go to law school, but really how you manage the admissions process. And if you do the planning the right way, right from the time when you're on the verge of applying to law school, really navigating, having a plan, then going to law school in order to have a career in politics or whatever else, even if you never actually practice law, can be a very prudent and intelligent thing to do. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you agree. Let me know if you have a different experience or whatever. And let me know also if you or someone you know might benefit from law school admissions consulting. I'm in a position right now to take on a few clients, and I'll probably begin to scale this up in the coming months. But right now would be a good time for me to take on one or two clients. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to you soon.